And welcome back. There he is, Ted Nolan, the new man behind the bench. And in studio with us now is the hockey man, Steve Manson. And Steve, I don't think I have to ask you this question, but I will. How do you feel about the changes?
Absolutely thrilled. Just thrilled. You never want to see anybody lose their job and whatever, but it was time. It was time last spring. Ralston should never, well, and I've said it right here on the air, Ralston should never have been hired. He was way over his head as an NHL coach. I hope he bounces back somewhere along the line and can rebuild his credentials, but he never should have been behind an NHL bench.
So let me ask you a question. We've talked, I mean, we've had several opportunities to talk about this during this short season already.
Seems a lot longer.
I know. Darcy Regier, Terry Pegula, adamantly said Darcy Regier was not going anywhere. In fact, when the story came out last month out of Toronto that he was going to be fired, we joked about, that just kept him here for another month. And it did. But the way that this happened, I mean, Terry Pegula happens to have a meeting with Pat LaFontaine, and then it occurs to him this might be the right guy. I mean,
well, you got to put a little grain of salt with the story. I'm sure when he ran into Pat and everything, the seed had already been planted in his mind. I mean, the whole thing was falling apart at the seams. And you know what? It wasn't that the fans were that mad at the Sabres. It was, and I talked to people all over town. They didn't care. It was like, whatever they do is fine. I don't care. I'm not going to the games. And there was a lot of empty seats, even though they had already been paid for as season ticket holders. You could pick up a seat outside very cheaply if you wanted to go to a game. And the apathy of the fans, I think, is what started to really, really get the Sabres thinking that we got to do something. And boy, when they decide to do something, they do something.
Well, and as you live long enough, you start to see, life go around in circles.
Yep.
And I just can't get over the irony, because of both Pat LaFontaine and Ted Nolan, Darcy Regier did not play a positive role with either one of those gentlemen when they left. And for both of them to be coming in as he was going out the door is ironic.
It is ironic, but I'm going to say those are both Larry Quinn moves. I mean, Darcy Regier was a young general manager at the time. Darcy Regier didn't even have the job for 3-4 days before the Nolan thing came up, and the LaFontaine thing came up that fall. So, I mean, both those moves were engineered by Larry Quinn.
Well, then let me ask you this. Is Darcy Regier responsible for anything? Because,
that's
okay,
you're
giving him a pass.
I've given him a pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. No, he's responsible for a lot of things. 16 years of responsibility. He also gets credit for some stuff that happened here. But the bottom line is it was time. It was time a few years ago. It was certainly time last spring. And I think what really did Darcy in was the hiring of Ron Ralston. Maybe not as the interim coach because they needed to move somebody fast, but the rehiring him last spring without even doing any interviewing. And the fact is, I talked to a lot of people around the league and stuff like that. They just couldn't believe what Buffalo was doing. And this whole thing that they were so focused that they were going to get first overall pick, we're going to finish in last place no matter what happens. And I said it the last time I was here, you don't build a team just by the draft. Certainly the draft is an important part of it, but you also build a team through trades and through player moves and through free agency. You use all the available things. And how many more draft picks do we need? I mean, the big question coming up is we're going to have all these draft picks and we're going to draft them all at the same time. All their contracts are going to come up at the same time. This is a salary cap league. Edmonton's in that problem now. They've got so many first-round picks. They can't afford to bring anybody else in because they had to use all the money to sign those guys after their 3 years. This stuff comes back to roost at some time. And I think those two things, especially the hiring of Ralston, is what finally did Darcy in.
Well, let's start first with Ted Nolan. Now, first of all, let me say, back in the day, actually it was 15 years ago, I did the Ted Nolan show with Ted Nolan on Empire Sports. I should have brought in a photo because Ted Nolan looks exactly the same, and I look like this. So I want to know what the heck's going on because he's not that much younger than me.
No.
But anyway, I had nice dark hair and a nice dark mustache. But, I liked Ted. I always liked Ted.
Oh, yeah.
When he left this organization, there was absolutely a campaign to besmirch his reputation.
Yes,
it came from the front office. I personally heard very insulting and terrible things from people in control, in charge of that hockey team. I was actually very disappointed when the Regises in Adelphi took over that they didn't bring Nolan back.
But you're forgetting one thing. When the Regises finally got control, Lindy Ruff had this team fighting for a playoff spot. They weren't going to do anything in that. And then
That's true.
Lindy took them all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals
That's
that year.
true.
How do you get
Yes.
I mean, you just fired the coach of the year before. Now you're going to fire somebody that went to the Eastern Conference
You're right.
Finals.
You're right.
So.
But I knew John was a huge fan of Ted.
Oh, absolutely.
But anyway, so Ted's back. And Ted has coached elsewhere since then. He did an okay job with the Islanders. Why? What?
Took them to the playoffs. The only time.
Yes, he did. Yes,
until
he did.
last year is
they
the only
lost
time
to the Sabres, as a
yes,
matter
they
of
did.
fact, ironically. So, what do you think Ted Nolan's going to be able to perform, and what is he going to be able to prove in the time he's got here this year?
First of all, he's not a miracle worker. There's no question the talent on this team is not up to the level they want it to be. I mean, they even made some moves today where they sent some of the kids. Ted's first thing he says is there's too many teenagers on this team, and he moved 3 of them out today. You're going to see a team that's going to show up every single night. Do they have enough talent to win every night? Questionable. But the fact is they're going to show up, because if they don't show up, the first move is the players that don't are going to be sitting on the end of the bench, then they're going to be sitting in the press box, and then they're going to be playing for Rochester.
Why don't you go over the moves they made today?
Well, they sent 3 guys to Rochester. Gregorenko went down on what they call a training rehabilitation thing. He can stay down there for a couple of weeks.
To Rochester?
Yeah, to Rochester.
He can't stay down there indefinitely.
He can't stay down there indefinitely. He can only stay down there probably 2 weeks. Okay, they also sent the defenseman, the Russian defenseman, back to London. If I'm having a senior moment
He's
here.
the hockey man.
Yeah, I know.
All right, we'll give you a pass on that. Well, guys, let's have our John DeShulo's in the control room. John,
It's
I'm
Nikita.
Khrushchev.
Yeah, well, whatever. He went down.
Fedorov.
He went. There you go. And let's see, who else did they send down? Well, I told you about Gregorenko. They're keeping Gergeson up here.
Okay.
And Russelainen is also going to Rochester. And the big question with him was whether he was going to, if he got sent down, would he go back to Finland or not? He chose to go to Rochester, which I think is an excellent move. And this opens a chance to bring Weber off the IR, and so he'll be probably playing again tonight. And you're going to see, you know what? It's like throwing raw meat into the Rochester locker room. You're going to see those kids because they know there's now openings. They know there's now chances to come back to Buffalo. Luke Adam has certainly played well down there. He's had 3 or 4 kicks at the can up here, but he hasn't had a kick at the can with Ted Nolan as coach. Let's see what he can do. If he can't do it with Teddy as a coach, then it's time to give up on him.
Okay, we only got 2 minutes, so I don't want Pat LaFontaine.
Yep.
Now, here's a guy who says, I don't know enough about being a GM to be a GM, but he's going to oversee the GM.
And, I mean,
does that make sense to you?
There's a lot of CEOs that aren't. There's positions in the company where there's far more qualified people doing the job, but being CEO, watching over it, hiring the right person. I was always taught you hire the best person you can hire, and then you get out of their way and let them do their job.
I don't want to beat up on Ted Black.
Right.
But how many presidents do you need for this organization? So Pat's, normally wouldn't what Pat's doing be the president of the hockey team?
No, a lot of teams are doing it now.
Really?
Calgary hired Brian Burke to do the exact same thing LaFontaine did down there in Colorado. They've done that, and a few other teams where they've divided up now the business side and the hockey side. Because, hey, if you're a great businessman, that doesn't make you a great hockey guy. Yeah, I might want to bring up somebody that just recently left the organization. But we'll leave that alone.
Would that be Larry
Mr. Quinn? Okay.
Yeah.
Just because you're a great business guy doesn't make you a great hockey guy. Just because you're a great hockey guy doesn't make you a great business guy.
No, although I don't agree with a lot of things Larry did, but I will say Larry was a very smart guy.
Oh,
extremely. And he was very successful on the business side. He had played the game, and so he thought he knew something about hockey. But, I mean, that's what your general manager is supposed to do normally.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But you know what? Having an extra how can you not have Pat LaFontaine? If he wants to work for you, how can you not have him work for you?
I think Pat's
you shake his hand and look in his eyes, you know right away, this is a guy who's been successful at everything he's done in his life. Why can't he be successful at this?
He is one of the top 3 most popular, not just Sabres, but athletes ever to play in Buffalo.
I would say right there, up there with Gilbert Perreault and as Mr.
Jim Kelly's and
Jim Kelly's and the whole bit.
All right, Steve, we're out of time. Thanks so much for coming down. We'll obviously be talking to you again next month.
There's going to be a lot to talk about this year.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Hockey's
Maybe we'll
back.
team you and Art Wander back
That's
up.
the whole point. Is the excitement is back. That's all
You're right.
That's all you can ask for.
Steve Manson, the hockey man. We'll be back. Take a look at Joe Licata, the excellent quarterback of UB, right after this.